Two markets, one state. New Jersey real estate is splitting into two powerful stories. One where the typical buyer fights for scarce listings, and another where eight-figure estates move through a small circle of trusted hands. Start with the ground beneath your feet. Price pressure has been building for years, and it shows in simple, stubborn numbers. The median sale price for a home in the United States hit $419,300 in May 2024. In the same month, housing inventory sat at a 3.7-month supply, a level that signals scarcity and gives sellers the upper hand. When inventory sits under roughly 4 months, it means homes are being absorbed quickly and auctions are thin. The Garden State is feeling that squeeze. An analysis of New Jersey's own listing activity showed the average time on market contracted from 39 days in 2023 to 35 days in 2024. 4 days shaved off in a year might sound small. In a bidding war, it is the whole weekend. That speed comes with behavior you can recognize. In a market defined by limited inventory, sellers are likely to receive multiple offers. Buyers who wait miss their window. Meanwhile, financing remains decisive. Pre-approval is not just etiquette anymore. It is admission to the room. These are not abstract dynamics. They are lived realities shaped by the numbers you just heard. Zoom out, and another engine is roaring across New Jersey's map, not in cul-de-sacs, but in logistics corridors. By the end of 2025, industrial real estate transactions across the United States totaled $76.30 billion, almost a dead match for the previous year's $76.20 billion. Prices per square foot climbed as well, $135 on average, up 10% year over year. New Jersey stood near the front of that pack. In 2025, the state logged $2.80 billion in industrial sales volume, an 8.5% increase over the prior year, with an average sale price of $226 per square foot, up 7.6% year over year and the highest investment cost per square foot in its region. One transaction tells the tale. A property at 201 Middlesex Center Boulevard, within close reach of Interstate 95, changed hands for $166.80 million. That is what the freight spine of the Northeast, wrapped around ports and dense demand, looks like in price form. But there is a third current, just above these two. In Bergen County, the top of the housing market is consolidating. Across 2024 and 2025, a single team ranked number one by transaction volume at every major luxury tier from $4 billion through $10 billion and above. By 2025, that grip extended to the $3 and up segment as well. At the very top, $8 million plus, $9 million plus, $10 million plus, the concentration was extreme. In several categories, that team represented a majority of all transactions, and in some cases accounted for every recorded sale. Market share at those heights frequently cleared 50%. In a small county on the Hudson's West Bank, the flight to certainty is quantifiable. What happened? Inventory pressure pushed New Jersey's mainstream market into a tighter, faster rhythm. At the same time, high-net-worth sellers in Bergen County favored teams with proven reach, especially for eight-figure listings where a misstep can mean millions lost. And while the housing market scrambled, the industrial backbone of the state stayed liquid as e-commerce and population density kept warehouse demand close to the turnpikes and the ports. None of that occurred in a vacuum. By late 2025, the national industrial vacancy rate sat at 9.2%. More than twice its level in 2022 and 120 basis points higher than a year earlier. Developers pulled back. Nationwide, 357.4 million square feet were under construction at the start of 2026. The prior year's deliveries came in just above 300 million square feet, the slowest since 2017. As the pipeline thinned, in-place industrial rents averaged $8.87 per square foot by year-end, increasing by $0.11 over the month and 5.4% annually. The causal chain begins with scarcity, where families live. A 3.7-month supply in May 2024 kept leverage in sellers' hands, and the clock sped up. New Jersey's average list-to-close timeline dropped from 30-9 to 35 days between 2023 and 2024, Signals suggest that lower interest rates, following a reduction announced in September, could coax more owners to list, incrementally raising inventory even as winter typically slows sales. But could is the operative word. In the meantime, the shape of competition stays defined by those two numbers: supply under 4 months and an average of 5 weeks to secure a home. At the top of Bergen County's market, the why is different. As values climb, the consequences of an error multiply. Sellers tend to prioritize pricing accuracy, execution certainty, and access to qualified buyers. That behavior narrows the field. The $3 million segment still sees more competition, yet repeated dominance above $4 in 2020, $4 and 2025, and expansion into the $3 million tier in 2025 signals that the habits formed at $8 and $10 plus can cascade downward. When more than half of deals in the uppermost tiers run through one team, occasional participation is no longer enough to win listings. Expertise at that level compounds, listing by listing. If you want the texture of what this split looks like on the ground, put the numbers together. Imagine a Rutherford buyer scrolling at midnight because a favorite goes under contract in 35 days. Then picture an Alpine or Tenafly seller eyeing $8 million plus and choosing the team that held a majority of transactions at that level in the last 2 years, and in certain categories handled every recorded sale. At one end of the spectrum, it is speed. CRAYNDE. At the other, it is certainty. Both are responses to risk, shaped by data you can count. The industrial story runs along different tracks, literally. Consider what $226 per square foot means for investors in New Jersey. It means paying a premium to be near people and ports, and doing so despite national headwinds. Vacancy nationally at 9.2% forced owners and occupiers to meet in the middle, while rents ticked up to $8.87 per square foot on average. Even with vacancies more than double their 2022 level, capital leaned in where barriers to new supply are real. Scarcity of developable land in New Jersey, high population density, and proximity to major ports acted as anchors for value. The result: a sales volume of $2.80 billion in 2025, and average sale prices that have more than doubled since 2019. These transactions sit on top of consumer behavior. In the third quarter of 2025, e-commerce sales totaled $310 billion, up 1.9% from the prior quarter and 5.1% year over year. That quarter, online sales represented 19.2% of core retail, its highest share since the second quarter of 2020. Holiday data pointed the same way. Between November 1 and December 31, total sales increased 4.1% year over year, and online sales rose 7%. When people click buy, warehouses swell with work. In New Jersey, that demand meets the turnpike. But the present is not soft. The industrial sector just absorbed a supply glut from the prior cycle's building spree. In 2025, approximately 300 million square feet delivered nationwide, and at the start of 2026, there were 357.4 million square feet under construction. We are at the lowest construction pace in a decade. Projections point to vacancies plateauing through the first half of 2026, then tightening in the second half as the reduced pipeline meets steady demand. That is not a guarantee. It is a balance of math and timing. The trend, for now, is toward normalization as the pipeline thins and occupancy grows into last year's completions. Even site selection is changing. Access to power has moved up the checklist. Developers now cite energy availability more often as critical, especially for data centers and advanced manufacturing. Utility prices are rising. Power-hungry categories are scaling. The operational evidence is stark. 89% of supply chain executives reported energy-related disruptions in the prior 12 months, and 83% believe the next major supply chain crisis will be energy-related. That is not just a logistics problem. It is a land use problem, a permitting problem, a cost problem, especially in dense states like New Jersey, where grid constraints and community resistance can clash with industrial expansion. If you want comparison points around the region, look a few hours in either direction. In Philadelphia, industrial vacancies hovered around 8% at year's end. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, vacancy was just 5.8%, one of the tightest landscapes in the country. New Jersey's investment pricing at $226 per square foot made it the most expensive market for investors in its region and the sixth priciest nationwide, while other northeastern markets like Boston saw average sale prices toward the upper half of national rankings at $171 per square foot. Those figures outline why money flows to the Garden State, despite national vacancy still at 9.2% and despite rent growth slowing in some parts of the country. Go back to Bergen County's luxury market and translate concentration into consequences. When market share exceeds 50% across upper tiers, and when categories like $9 and $10 plus see a single team handling a majority of deals, or even all recorded sales, buyers and sellers adjust. Sellers gravitate to the perceived safest hands. Buyers gain earlier access to inventory and off-market opportunities through the same networks. Over the two-year window of 2024 and 2025, dominance above $4 million set the stage for broader influence at $3 million plus by 2025. That progression is the data version of word of mouth. At the middle of the market, the numbers still tell a story of urgency. A median price of $419,300 in May 2024 across the United States collided with a 3.7-month supply and with New Jersey homes moving in 35 days on a statewide average. The result was predictable behavior. Sellers likely facing multiple offers, buyers forced to arrive with financing locked and deposits ready. The calendar adds pressure too. Even in a year when inventories might improve as rates ease, winter tends to blunt sales volume relative to spring and summer. That means timing matters. The promise of more listings tomorrow can conflict with the reality of fewer closings today. On the industrial side, the velocity is real but not reckless. National transactions of $76.30 billion in 2025 were realized even as average sale prices rose 10% year over year and vacancy remained elevated at 9.2%. In New Jersey, the $2.80 billion in transactions and $226 per square foot average suggest investors are choosing quality and location over headline vacancy rates. The e-commerce tailwind. $310 billion in Q3 2025, 19.2% of core retail reinforces that bet. And yet, limits exist. In one nearby market, Bridgeport, construction pipelines were hovering just above 1.5 million square feet as of late 2025, with projected market expansions around 1% of existing stock. In parts of the Northeast, including New Jersey, the constraint is not demand, it is land, infrastructure, and power. Energy is not the only pivot. Policy risk is in the room. A review of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is scheduled for July, with the prospect, if agreement falters, of a shortened and potentially sunsetting trade framework. Developers and operators are already cautious about long-term plans that depend on nearshoring and cross-border logistics. Tariff threats and material costs layer on top of that. In 2026, the path for industrial development involves more than land assemblage and permits. It includes trade policy calendar dates and grid maps. If you are thinking about cause and effect in the luxury sector, the calculus is simpler but no less structural. Bergen County's consolidation across $4 million through $10 plus in 2024 and 2025 reflects mature market behavior. Higher values demand tighter execution. That is why a single team could be number one across those tiers over a two-year stretch and also rise to the top at $3 million plus in 2025. Sellers in Alpine, Saddle River, and Englewood Cliffs, places where price tags routinely stretch the imagination, respond to the evidence they can see. When one team handled a majority of deals at $8 and above, and in certain categories all recorded sales, picking a generalist becomes an avoidable risk. Meanwhile, in Edison and Cranberry and Carteret towns, threaded by the turnpike, the industrial economy writes its own numbers. The $166.80 million purchase of the Middlesex Center Boulevard asset underscores that not all square footage is equal. New Jersey's average investment pricing at $226 per square foot in 2025 reflects limited land and maximum access to consumers. Even with a national slowdown in construction, just above 300 million square feet delivered in 2025, the lowest since 2017, and a pipeline of 357.4 million square feet under construction at the start of 2026, investors kept strategy steady where barriers protect value. Demand-side conditions reinforce this. Q3 2025 e-commerce. At $310 billion of core retail puts pressure on last-mile and regional nodes that can deliver in hours, not days. The holiday season's 4.1% year-over-year sales growth, coupled with 7% growth in online spending, extends momentum into peak season. Philadelphia's roughly 8% vacancy and Bridgeport's 5.8% show how tight regional networks can be. New Jersey sits between them, pricing higher per square foot than any neighbor for investments because the network touchpoints are that valuable. Turn back to the everyday homebuyer and measure the human effect of these charts. 35 days on market in New Jersey in 2020, 4 meant open houses felt shorter, not because the clock was different, but because the competition was. With a median national price near $419,300 and a 3.7-month supply, most buyers were not comparing sprawling inventories. They were comparing trade-offs. Fewer bedrooms for a shorter commute. A smaller yard for a safer bid. When interest rates eased in September, hope rose that more homeowners might list. Signals suggest that could bring higher inventory even if winter sales usually trail spring. But hope does not fund a closing. Pre-approval and a bigger down payment still make the difference when sellers sift offers. Learning these patterns helps buyers and sellers avoid mistakes. It helps investors understand why $226 per square foot is logical in New Jersey when the national average sits at $135. It explains why a $166.80 million warehouse near Interstate 95 makes more sense than a cheaper asset far from ports or people. It gives context for why Bergen County's luxury market behaves like a club with strict membership rules, where past performance at $8 and $10 plus grants entree to $3 million listings a year later. Industrial developers are also reshaping where they look to build. The weight of 89% of supply chain executives citing energy-related disruptions in the prior year and 83% anticipating energy as the next crisis forces new priorities. Access to power now competes with access to highways in site selection. Communities are noticing too. Pushback to power-hungry data centers is becoming more public, and in 2026, that friction is likely to intensify. In New Jersey, where public utilities and neighborhoods share borders with rail lines and interstates, expect power procurement to become a negotiating line item as significant as taxes or traffic studies. These dynamics connect the mainstream housing market, the apex of Bergen County luxury, and the state's industrial backbone. The first is defined by scarcity. 3.7 months of supply in May 2024 and 35 days from listing to contract in 2024. The second is defined by concentration, dominance above 4 million in 2024 and 2025, leadership at $3 million plus in 2025, and market share frequently exceeding 50% at the top tiers, sometimes capturing all recorded sales. The third is defined by liquidity and constraint. $2.80 billion in sales in 2025 at $226 per square foot, rising national rents to 82.7 cents per square foot, and a national vacancy plateau at 9.2% attached to the lowest construction year since 2017. None of this requires guessing. It requires reading what the numbers have already said. E-commerce at $310 billion in Q3 2025, 19.2% of core retail. National industrial transactions at $76.30 in 2025. A single New Jersey property at $166.80 million within reach of I-95. A calendar showing July for a critical trade agreement review. Interest rates edging lower after September with hopes that more owners will finally list. And a Bergen County map where the most expensive tiers were frequently controlled by one team across 2 years. So what comes next? Base case for the next 12 months. The mainstream New Jersey housing market stays tight, but gains some breathing room if lower rates keep coaxing owners to list. Expect the buyer experience, shaped by a 3.7-month supply in mid-2024 and 35-day marketing windows in 2024, to remain competitive even if it becomes slightly less frantic. In Bergen County luxury, concentration persists at the uppermost tiers. Leadership earned above $4 across 2024 and 2025 and extended to $3 million plus in 2025 does not evaporate, it compounds. On the industrial front, vacancies likely plateau through the first half of 2026 and begin to tighten in the second half as this diminished pipeline, 745 million square feet under construction at the start of the year and just over 300 million square feet delivered in 2025, meets sustained demand buoyed by online sales. Pricing in New Jersey remains firm, with investment metrics anchored by $226 per square foot in 2025 and a land supply that is not expanding. 2 watch items should stay on your screen. First, energy security. With 82.9% of supply chain leaders having felt energy disruptions and 83% expecting the next crisis to be energy-driven, power access and pricing can alter where and how fast New Jersey can add industrial capacity. That shift could slow data center rollouts and push advanced manufacturers to submarkets with better grid headroom, reshaping price trajectories in select counties. Second, the July review of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Even the risk of a shortened extension window can defer groundbreakings tied to nearshoring, affect material costs, and ripple into land valuations. A prolonged period of uncertainty could slow starts further, beyond the lowest in a decade construction pace logged in 2025. Call it a split screen. On one side, a family in Maplewood competing against the clock, 35 days, multiple offers, pre-approval in hand. On the other, a Bergen County seller at $10 million plus, gravitating to the team that owned a majority of deals across the upper tiers in 2024 and 2025 and ascended to number 1 at $3 million plus by 2025. Underneath both, a logistics network pricing at $226 per square foot in 2025, moving goods that drove $310 billion in online sales in one quarter, and preparing for a year when vacancy pauses before tightening and energy becomes the constraint to solve. If you want more clear, data-grounded reads on New Jersey real estate as this year unfolds, subscribe for the next chapter.